The dust-laden wind carried a promise of rain as Xavier Hammond rode into the struggling town of Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1876. His weathered face, bronzed by years under the harsh western sun, revealed little of the turmoil within as he guided his chestnut mare down the main street. 3 days of hard riding had left him bone-weary, but the telegram burning a hole in his pocket had driven him forward with relentless urgency. "Sister passed. Nephew alone. Come quick." Xavier dismounted outside the town's only hotel, a 2-story clapboard building with peeling paint and a crooked sign. The boardwalk creaked beneath his boots as he secured his horse to the hitching post. His sister, Emma, had moved to Redemption Creek 5 years ago with her husband, a man Xavier had met only once at their wedding. The news of her death from fever had struck him like a physical blow. "You must be Hammond," a voice called out. A balding man in a stained apron stepped from the hotel's entrance. "Sheriff said you'd be coming. Name's Peterson. I run this establishment." Xavier nodded, removing his hat. "My nephew," Peterson's expression softened. "The boy's inside, been staying with me since. Well, since it happened. Quiet little fella. Hasn't said much since the burial." Xavier followed Peterson through the dim lobby to a small sitting room. In the corner, a small figure sat motionless on a wooden chair, staring out the window. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 years old, his thin frame swallowed by clothes that hung loose on his shoulders. Dark hair, like Emma's, fell across his forehead. "Samuel," Peterson said gently, "your uncle's here." The boy turned slowly. His eyes, green like his mother's, widened as they settled on Xavier. For a moment, neither moved. Then Samuel stood, his movements stiff and uncertain. "Hello, Samuel," Xavier said, crouching down to the boy's level. "I'm your Uncle Xavier." Samuel studied him with an intensity that belied his young age. His small hands twisted the worn fabric of his shirt. "Mama said you chase bad men." Xavier swallowed hard. "I was a marshal for a spell, not anymore." The boy nodded solemnly. "She showed me your picture." An awkward silence followed. Xavier had never had much experience with children. He'd spent the last decade tracking outlaws across the frontier, a solitary existence that had suited him just fine. Now, faced with his sister's orphaned son, he felt utterly lost. "I reckon we should get your things," Xavier finally said. "We've got a journey ahead of us." Samuel didn't move. "Where are we going?" "I've got a small place in Colorado Territory. It's not much, but there's room enough for 2. The boy's face remained expressionless. "Will I stay with you now?" Xavier nodded, the weight of responsibility settling heavy across his shoulders. "Yes, I'm your family now." Samuel looked down at his scuffed boots. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. Could you please pretend you're my daddy?" "Just for a little while." The request hit Xavier like a gunshot. He stared at the boy, at Emma's eyes looking back at him, full of a desperate hope that threatened to break what remained of his heart. Something shifted inside him, a door opening to a room he'd kept locked for years. "I am now," Xavier whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I am now, son." Samuel's small shoulders relaxed slightly. He reached out tentatively and took Xavier's calloused hand in his own. Peterson cleared his throat from the doorway. "Boys' things are already packed, not much to speak of." Xavier nodded his thanks. "We'll stay the night and head out at first light." As they prepared to leave the sitting room, the front door of the hotel opened. Xavier turned to see a young woman enter, her arms laden with parcels. Her honey-brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though several strands had escaped to frame her face. She wore a simple blue dress, dusty from the street, and as she looked up, her warm brown eyes met Xavier's. "Miss Holloway," Peterson called out. "This here's Mr. Hammond, come for his nephew." The woman, Miss Holloway, set her packages on a nearby table and approached, her expression kind but reserved. "Mr. Hammond, I'm Olivia Holloway, the schoolteacher here. I've been looking after Samuel during the days." She extended her hand, which Xavier took briefly. "Madam," he acknowledged with a nod. "Miss Holloway reads stories. Samuel volunteered, the first hint of animation in his voice. And she knows all about animals and stars. Olivia smiled at the boy. I brought something for you, Samuel. She retrieved a small package from her collection and handed it to him. A book about the mountains of Colorado, since that's where you'll be going. Samuel accepted the gift with reverent hands, his fingers tracing the illustrated cover. That's mighty kind of you, Xavier said, studying the schoolteacher with new interest. It's the least I could do. Her eyes held his for a moment longer than necessary. Samuel is a bright boy, he deserves every opportunity. Xavier sensed there was more she wanted to say, but Peterson interrupted. Miss Holloway boards here too, been a godsend with the boy these past weeks. Perhaps you'll join us for supper. Xavier found himself asking, surprised by his own invitation. A hint of color touched Olivia's cheeks. Thank you, Mr. Hammond, I'd be pleased to. That evening, they gathered in the hotel's small dining room. Samuel sat between Xavier and Olivia, occasionally glancing between them as if reassuring himself of their presence. As they ate the plain but hearty fare, Xavier learned that Olivia had come west from Boston 2 years prior. My father was a professor, she explained. He believed education should reach every corner of this country. When he passed, I decided to honor his wishes by bringing learning to places that needed it most. Redemption Creek certainly qualifies, Xavier remarked. Yes, though I'm afraid I'll need to move on soon. The mining company that funded the school is closing operations here. The town council can no longer afford a teacher. Samuel looked up in alarm. You're leaving too? Olivia reached out to gently squeeze the boy's hand. Not for a few weeks yet. I need to finish the term and make arrangements. Xavier found himself strangely disappointed by this news. Where will you go? There's a position in Laramie, she said, though without enthusiasm. It's a larger school, but not what you hoped for, Xavier finished. She met his eyes with a startled expression, as if surprised he had read her so easily. No, she admitted. I preferred the smaller communities where every child can receive attention. In the larger towns, many still slip through the cracks. Later, after Samuel had been tucked into bed in the room they would share for the night, Xavier found Olivia on the hotel's back porch. She stood gazing at the stars, a shawl pulled tight around her shoulders against the evening chill. He's asleep, Xavier said, joining her at the railing. He's exhausted, poor child, so much change. She turned to face him. Mr. Hammond, may I speak frankly? Xavier nodded, bracing himself. Samuel needs stability, consistency. He's lost everything familiar to him. Her voice was gentle but firm. Do you have any experience with children? None, Xavier admitted, but he's my blood, my responsibility. Responsibility isn't the same as knowing how to be a parent. She hesitated. Your sister mentioned you were a lawman, a dangerous profession. Former lawman, Xavier corrected. I turned in my badge 6 months ago, bought a small ranch in Colorado. It's peaceful there. Olivia's expression softened. I didn't mean to imply you're concerned for the boy, I understand. Xavier looked out at the darkness beyond the porch. Truth is, I'm concerned too. Never thought I'd be raising a child, especially not like this, but I aim to do right by him. I believe you, she said after a moment, and I apologize if I overstepped. No need for apologies. Samuel's lucky to have had someone who cares looking after him. They stood in companionable silence, the night sounds of the small town surrounding them. Finally, Olivia spoke again. If you don't mind my asking, where in Colorado? A place called Willow Creek near the foothills. Small town, friendly folks. Good school, he added, realizing suddenly how important that would be now. It sounds lovely. There was wistfulness in her voice that made Xavier look at her more closely. The teacher there is retiring come Christmas, he found himself saying. Town's been searching for a replacement. Her eyes widened slightly. Is that so? Might be worth considering if you're looking for a small community that needs teaching. Xavier hadn't planned to make the suggestion, but now that he had, he found he liked the idea very much. Perhaps it would, she said softly, a small smile playing at her lips. Dawn broke cold and clear the next morning. Xavier loaded their meager belongings onto his horse while Samuel stood solemnly nearby, clutching the book Olivia had given him. The boy had been quiet during breakfast, pushing food around his plate more than eating it. "We'll need to get another horse," Xavier told him, securing the last bundle. "Can't have you walking all the way to Colorado." Samuel nodded without enthusiasm. Xavier sighed, wishing he knew how to bridge the gap between them. He'd never been good with words, preferring action to conversation, but this small, grieving boy needed more from him than he knew how to give. "Mr. Hammond," Olivia's voice called from the hotel entrance. She hurried toward them, carrying a small cloth-wrapped package. "Some provisions for your journey." "Thank you, Miss Holloway." Their fingers brushed as he accepted the bundle, sending an unexpected warmth through his hand. She crouched down to Samuel's level. "Remember what we talked about, Samuel, about being brave?" The boy nodded, his lips pressed tightly together as if holding back tears. "And you'll practice your letters," she continued. "Perhaps you can write to me and tell me about your new home." "Yes, madam," Samuel whispered. Olivia hesitated, then reached out to smooth his hair. "I'll miss you, Samuel Hammond." To Xavier's surprise, Samuel suddenly threw his arms around Olivia's neck, burying his face against her shoulder. She held him close, her eyes meeting Xavier's over the boy's head. The emotion he saw there matched the tightness in his own chest. "It's time, son," Xavier said gently after a moment. Samuel pulled back, swiping quickly at his eyes. Olivia stood, composing herself with visible effort. "Safe travels to you both," she said. Xavier lifted Samuel onto the horse, then mounted behind him. As they rode away, Samuel twisted to look back, raising a small hand in farewell. Xavier found himself doing the same, his eyes lingering on the figure of the schoolteacher until she disappeared from view. They traveled slowly, stopping frequently to rest. Xavier purchased a gentle mare for Samuel in the next town, a docile creature that the boy gradually warmed to. By the third day, Samuel had begun to ask questions about the ranch, about Colorado, and most often about Xavier himself. "Did you really catch bad men?" he asked as they made camp that evening. Xavier fed another stick into their small fire. "I did." "Were you scared?" "Sometimes," Xavier admitted. "Being scared isn't bad, Samuel. It's what you do when you're scared that matters." The boy considered this. "My pa died when men robbed the bank. Mama said he was brave." Xavier nodded, remembering the news of his brother-in-law's death 2 years prior. "He was protecting others. That's very brave." "Did you know him?" "Not well," Xavier said honestly. "I met him just once at your parents' wedding." "He seemed like a good man. Your mother loved him very much." Samuel's eyes welled with tears. "I miss them." Xavier hesitated, then put his arm around the boy's thin shoulders. "I know, son, I miss your mother too. She was my only sister." "Do you have a wife?" Samuel asked suddenly. "No," Xavier replied, surprised by the question. "Never found the right woman, I suppose." "Miss Holloway isn't married either," Samuel observed with the directness of a child. "She said she was too busy teaching to think about it." Xavier found himself smiling. "Is that so?" "She smelled like flowers," Samuel continued. "And she makes the best apple cake for special days at school." "She seemed like a fine woman," Xavier agreed, an image of Olivia's warm brown eyes appearing in his mind. The journey to Colorado took nearly 2 weeks, with stops in small towns along the way to rest and resupply. With each passing day, Samuel grew a little less withdrawn, a little more trusting. He began to ride beside Xavier rather than behind him, asking endless questions about the animals they saw and the land they passed through. At night, Xavier read from Olivia's book about Colorado, his finger tracing the words slowly so Samuel could follow along. The boy's eagerness to learn reminded Xavier painfully of Emma, who had always been the clever one in the family. "Will I go to school in Colorado?" Samuel asked one evening. "Of course," Xavier assured him. "Education's important." "Maybe Miss Holloway will come teach there," Samuel said hopefully. "She said she might write to the town about the job." Xavier felt an unexpected leap of anticipation at the thought. Maybe she will at that. They arrived at Willow Creek on a crisp autumn afternoon. The small town nestled in a valley framed by distant mountains, their peaks already dusted with early snow. Xavier's ranch lay just outside town, 20 acres with a modest cabin, a barn, and a corral where he kept the few horses he was raising. As they approached, Samuel's eyes widened. "Is that our house?" "That's home," Xavier confirmed, feeling a strange mixture of pride and uncertainty. Would the boy find it lacking? It was a far cry from the town life he'd known, but Samuel's face brightened. "We have horses, and look at those mountains, just like in the book." Relief washed through Xavier. "Wait until you see inside. There's a room just for you." The cabin was dusty from Xavier's absence, but otherwise welcoming. He'd built it himself after leaving the Marshal Service, creating a home for the first time in his adult life. Now, seeing it through Samuel's eyes, he noted all the things it lacked: curtains on the windows, proper dishes instead of the mismatched tin plates he used, books and toys suitable for a child. "We'll make it more comfortable," he promised as Samuel explored. "Get some things from town tomorrow." "I like it," Samuel declared, climbing onto a chair to peer out the window toward the mountains. "It's like an adventure." That night, after settling Samuel in the small second bedroom, Xavier sat alone on the porch, the familiar weight of his pipe in his hand. The stars seemed impossibly bright, the silence broken only by the occasional call of a night bird. He thought of the journey ahead, not the physical one they'd just completed, but the longer, more challenging path of raising a child alone. He thought, too, of Olivia Holloway, with her steady gaze and gentle manner. Samuel had mentioned her daily during their journey, his admiration for the schoolteacher evident in every story. Xavier found himself hoping she might consider Willow Creek for her next position, and not solely for Samuel's benefit. The next few weeks brought a routine of sorts. Xavier enrolled Samuel in the local school, purchased necessary supplies, and began the task of transforming his bachelor's cabin into a proper home for a child. The townspeople, curious about the former lawman's sudden acquisition of a nephew, were nevertheless welcoming, offering assistance and advice Xavier hadn't known to ask for. Mrs. Johnson, the mayor's wife, brought over curtains and linens. "Can't have a child living like a hermit," she declared, bustling around hanging fabric while Xavier watched in bemused silence. The town's general store owner, a gruff widower named Thompson, presented Samuel with a hand-carved wooden horse. "Made it for my boy once," he said gruffly. "He's grown now. No use to him anymore." Even the current schoolteacher, elderly Mrs. Pemberton, took an interest, sending books home with Samuel and notes for Xavier about the boy's progress. "She says I read better than most 8-year-olds, Samuel announced proudly one evening. "And that I ask good questions." Xavier smiled, feeling a swell of pride. "That doesn't surprise me one bit. She's nice, but she's not like Miss Holloway," Samuel added. "Mrs. Pemberton never tells stories about faraway places." Xavier nodded, understanding the boy's lingering attachment to the teacher who had helped him through his most difficult days. "Miss Holloway was special," he agreed. "Do you think she'll come here?" Samuel asked, his expression hopeful. "To teach when Mrs. Pemberton leaves?" "I don't know, son." Xavier ruffled the boy's hair. "But she'd be welcome if she did." As if summoned by their conversation, a letter arrived the following week. Xavier recognized Olivia's neat handwriting immediately, though the letter was addressed to Samuel. The boy tore it open eagerly at the breakfast table. "She's coming," Samuel exclaimed after scanning the contents. "Miss Holloway says she wrote to the town council and they offered her the position. She'll be here after Christmas." Xavier felt his heart quicken. "Is that so?" Samuel thrust the letter toward him. "Read it." "She says she's looking forward to seeing me again, and that she hopes we're both well and that Colorado is as beautiful as the book said." Xavier took the letter, his eyes moving over the careful script. Olivia's words were warm but proper, expressing her pleasure at securing the position in Willow Creek and her anticipation of seeing Samuel again. At the end, she had added a brief note: "Please give my regards to your uncle. I hope he has found the peace he was seeking in Colorado." Xavier reread that line several times, wondering at the insight it revealed. He hadn't spoken to her about seeking peace, yet somehow she had understood that was exactly what had driven him to leave his old life behind. "This is good news," he told Samuel, returning the letter. "You'll have to write back and tell her all about Willow Creek." Samuel nodded eagerly. "Will you help me? I want to tell her about the ranch and the mountains and my new friend Daniel and everything." That evening they composed a reply together, Samuel dictating while Xavier wrote. The boy's excitement was infectious, and Xavier found himself adding a brief note of his own at the end. "Willow Creek will be fortunate to have you, Miss Holloway. Samuel speaks of you daily. We both look forward to your arrival. Respectfully, X. Hammond." As winter descended on Willow Creek, bringing snow and bitter winds, Xavier and Samuel settled into a comfortable rhythm. During the day, while Samuel attended school, Xavier tended to the ranch and picked up odd jobs in town, his reputation as a former lawman making him a valued addition to the community. In the evenings, they read together, played checkers, or simply talked, the initial awkwardness between them gradually dissolving. Samuel's nightmares, frequent in the first weeks, became less common. He began to laugh more, to explore the ranch with growing confidence, and to speak of his parents with a bittersweet fondness rather than raw grief. Xavier watched the transformation with a mixture of relief and wonder, amazed at the resilience of the human spirit, especially in one so young. Their correspondence with Olivia continued. Her letters, though primarily addressed to Samuel, increasingly included passages meant for Xavier. She described her preparations for departure, her hopes for the school in Willow Creek, and between the lines, a growing anticipation that matched his own. As Christmas approached, Xavier faced a new challenge: how to make the holiday special for a boy experiencing his first Christmas without his parents. He consulted Mrs. Johnson, who immediately organized a community effort to ensure Samuel wouldn't feel forgotten. On Christmas Eve, they attended a gathering at the town hall. Samuel, initially shy among the crowd, soon joined the other children in games and singing. Xavier watched from a corner, nursing a cup of cider when Thompson approached. "Boy's doing well," the storekeeper observed, settling in. Xavier nodded. "Better than I expected. He's stronger than he looks." "Children usually are," Thompson studied him. "You're doing right by him, Hammond. Not every man would have stepped up like you did." "He's family," Xavier said simply. "Heard the new schoolteacher's arriving next week," Thompson continued, a knowing look in his eye. "Samuel talks about her non-stop, says she's the prettiest lady in the whole world." Xavier felt a flush creep up his neck. "He thinks highly of her, that's certain," Thompson chuckled. Town's already buzzing with speculation. Single male guardian, single female teacher. "Well, you know how people talk. People should mind their business," Xavier grumbled, though without real heat. "Maybe so." Thompson clapped him on the shoulder. "But for what it's worth, a boy needs a mother as much as a father." Before Xavier could respond, Samuel rushed over, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Uncle Xavier, Mrs. Johnson says we can take home some of the gingerbread house, can we?" The moment passed, but Thompson's words lingered in Xavier's mind as they returned home that night, Samuel clutching his precious gingerbread treasure. The boy had adapted remarkably to calling Xavier uncle. But that first plea, "Please pretend you're my daddy," had never truly faded from either of their minds. Christmas morning brought a small pile of presents, practical items like warm socks and a new coat, but also toys from the community and books Xavier had ordered specially from Denver. Samuel's delight was infectious, his gratitude for each gift genuine. "I have something for you too," he announced shyly, retrieving a crudely wrapped package from behind the small pine tree they had decorated. Xavier opened it carefully to find a hand-drawn picture of their cabin with two figures standing outside, one tall, one small. Above them, in careful letters, "My family." "Mrs. Pemberton helped me with the writing," Samuel explained anxiously. "Do you like it?" Xavier swallowed the lump in his throat. "It's the best gift I've ever received," he said truthfully. Samuel beamed. "I made one for Miss Holloway too." But with 3 people. The implication wasn't lost on Xavier. "I see," he said carefully. "That's thoughtful of you." "Daniel says when people like each other, they get married," Samuel continued matter-of-factly. "Do you like Miss Holloway?" Xavier nearly choked on his coffee. "Samuel, I've only met Miss Holloway once, and Daniel shouldn't be filling your head with such notions." Samuel appeared unconvinced. "But you smile when her letters come, and you read them lots of times." Xavier sighed, unable to deny the observation. "I respect Miss Holloway very much," he said diplomatically. "She was very kind to you when you needed kindness. That means a lot to me." Samuel nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. "I think she likes you too. She always asks about you in her letters." The day of Olivia's arrival dawned clear and cold, the fresh snow sparkling in the winter sunlight. Xavier had offered to meet her stagecoach, an invitation she had accepted in her last letter. Samuel, though desperately wanting to come along, had school that day. "You can see Miss Holloway after your lessons," Xavier told him firmly. "First impressions matter, and being a boy who values education will impress her more than skipping school to meet her." Samuel reluctantly agreed, extracting a promise that Xavier would bring Olivia to the ranch that very afternoon. Xavier arrived in town early, checking that the room the town council had arranged for Olivia at the boarding house was properly prepared. He found himself uncharacteristically nervous, adjusting his collar and smoothing his freshly trimmed beard as he waited for the stagecoach. When it finally arrived in a cloud of snow and steam, Xavier stood straighter, his eyes fixed on the door. Several passengers disembarked before Olivia appeared, her familiar figure bundled against the cold, her face partially obscured by a woolen scarf. As she stepped down, her gaze swept the small crowd until it found Xavier. Even from a distance, he could see her smile, bright and genuine. He moved forward, suddenly eager to close the space between them. "Miss Holloway," he greeted, taking her gloved hand in his. "Welcome to Willow Creek." "Mr. Hammond," she replied, her voice warm despite the chill in the air. "How wonderful to see you again." There was a moment of awkward hesitation before Xavier released her hand. "Let me help with your luggage. You must be exhausted from the journey." "It was long," she admitted as they retrieved her trunks, but the anticipation made it bearable. "How is Samuel?" "Thriving," Xavier told her, pride evident in his voice. "He wanted to be here today, but I insisted he attend school." "Very appropriate," Olivia approved, "though I'm eager to see him too." As they walked toward the boarding house, Xavier found the nervousness fading, replaced by a comfortable ease. Olivia asked questions about the town, the school, and the people, her genuine interest in her new community evident. "Samuel has prepared for your arrival for weeks," Xavier told her. "He's cleaned his room 3 times and made you a welcome gift." Olivia's expression softened. "He's such a special child. Your sister raised him well." "She did," Xavier agreed. "I'm just trying to continue what she started." Olivia stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "You've done more than that, Mr. Hammond. From Samuel's letters, it's clear you've given him not just a home but a father's love. That's an extraordinary gift." Xavier felt warmth spread through his chest despite the cold. "He makes it easy to care for him." "Children often do," she said softly. "But not all men would have opened their hearts as you have." Their eyes met, and Xavier felt something shift between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. For all their different backgrounds, they shared a fundamental commitment to Samuel's well-being. "I promised Samuel I'd bring you to the ranch this afternoon," Xavier said after a moment, "if you're not too tired from your journey." "I'd like that very much," Olivia replied. "Just give me time to refresh myself and unpack the essentials." That afternoon, Samuel's face when he saw Olivia waiting outside the schoolhouse was a study in pure joy. He ran to her, all propriety forgotten, and she caught him in a warm embrace. look how you've grown," she exclaimed, holding him at arm's length. "And in such a short time, it's all the fresh air and good food," Samuel declared, repeating what Mrs. Johnson often said. "Uncle Xavier says I'll be as tall as him someday." "I have no doubt," Olivia agreed, her eyes meeting Xavier's over the boy's head. The three of them rode back to the ranch together, Samuel chattering non-stop about everything Olivia had missed since they'd last seen each other. Xavier mostly listened, content to observe their interaction, and the easy way Olivia drew Samuel out, asking just the right questions to keep his enthusiasm flowing. At the ranch, Samuel insisted on giving Olivia a tour, proudly showing off his room, the barn, and the 3 young horses Xavier was training. Throughout it all, Xavier watched Olivia's genuine interest and the way she treated Samuel's enthusiasm with respect rather than condescension. "And this is where Uncle Xavier sits at night to look at the stars," Samuel explained as they reached the porch. "He says it helps him think." "It's a perfect spot for stargazing," Olivia agreed, gazing out at the mountain view. "I can see why you love it here, Samuel. Do you love it too?" The boy asked eagerly. Olivia glanced at Xavier before answering. "I think I could very easily come to love it," she said softly. That evening they shared a simple meal Xavier had prepared. Afterward, Samuel proudly presented Olivia with his drawing, the 3 of them standing in front of the cabin. "It's beautiful, Samuel," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll treasure it always." "See, I put all of us together," Samuel explained unnecessarily, "because we're all friends." Olivia carefully placed the drawing in her bag. "The very best of friends," she agreed. When it came time for Olivia to return to town, Samuel begged her to come back the next day. "Miss Holloway needs time to settle in before school starts," Xavier reminded him. "We'll see her soon enough." "Actually," Olivia said, "I was hoping to invite you both to dinner tomorrow at the hotel restaurant, as a thank you for your welcome." Samuel looked pleadingly at Xavier, who found himself unable to refuse in the face of such hope. "We'd be honored," he said. Over the following weeks, as Olivia began her teaching position and established herself in Willow Creek, she became a regular presence at the Hammond Ranch. She came for dinner on Sundays, helped Samuel with special projects, and gradually, imperceptibly, became part of their lives. Xavier found himself looking forward to her visits with an anticipation that both surprised and concerned him. He had long ago resigned himself to a solitary life, convinced that his years as a lawman had made him ill-suited for family responsibilities. Yet here he was, not only raising his nephew but also entertaining thoughts about the schoolteacher that went well beyond friendship. Winter gave way to spring, bringing with it new life to the ranch and a sense of possibility that Xavier hadn't felt in years. One mild April evening, as Samuel slept inside, Xavier and Olivia sat on the porch, watching the first stars appear. "Samuel seems so happy," Olivia observed. "You've created a wonderful home for him." "We have," Xavier said deliberately. "Your presence in his life has made all the difference." Olivia turned to him, her expression serious. "Xavier," she said, using his given name for the first time, "I need to be honest with you about something." His heart sank. "You're leaving Willow Creek," he guessed, dreading the confirmation. To his surprise, she laughed softly. "No, quite the opposite. I've been offered a permanent position here. The town council was most insistent." Relief flooded through him. "That's wonderful news." "Yes, but," she hesitated. "I've grown very attached to Samuel, and to you," she added quietly. "Perhaps more than is proper for a schoolteacher toward a student's guardian." Xavier felt his pulse quicken. "Propriety has never been my strongest concern," he said, reaching out to take her hand. "And I find myself thinking of you as much more than Samuel's teacher." Their eyes met in the gathering dusk, an unspoken question hanging between them. Slowly, Xavier leaned forward, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Olivia closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a gentle kiss that held both tenderness and promise. When they parted, Xavier kept her hand in his. "I never expected this," he admitted. "When I came to Redemption Creek to collect Samuel, I thought I was simply fulfilling an obligation to my sister. I had no idea I was starting a journey toward a real family." "The best journeys are often the ones we don't plan," Olivia replied, her eyes shining in the fading light. The sound of the cabin door opening made them turn. Samuel stood there in his nightshirt, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "I had a dream," he said, coming to sit between them. "We were all living here together, and Miss Holloway was teaching me piano, and Uncle Xavier was showing me how to ride the new colt." Xavier and Olivia exchanged glances over the boy's head. "That sounds like a wonderful dream," Olivia said softly. "It doesn't have to be just a dream," Xavier found himself saying, the words coming from somewhere deep inside him. "If Miss Holloway wanted to become part of our family someday." Samuel looked up eagerly. Like a real mama, Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I would be honored to be your mama, Samuel, if that's what you and your uncle want." "More than anything," Xavier said, his voice rough with emotion. Samuel looked between them, his expression solemn. "I knew it," he declared with the certainty of a child. "I told Daniel that Uncle Xavier smiled different when you were here." Olivia laughed, wiping away a tear. "Is that so?" "And you look at him the same way Mama used to look at my pa," Samuel continued matter-of-factly, "like he's the most important person in the whole world." Xavier felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You're a very observant young man," he managed, "so we'll be a real family," Samuel pressed, needing the confirmation. "We already are," Xavier said, putting his arm around the boy's shoulders and reaching for Olivia's hand. "We already are." In the autumn of that year, when the aspens turned golden against the Colorado sky, Xavier and Olivia were married in the small church in Willow Creek. Samuel stood proudly beside them, holding the rings on a small cushion Mrs. Johnson had sewn for the occasion. As they spoke their vows, Xavier thought back to that moment in Redemption Creek, when a grieving little boy had asked him to pretend to be his daddy. What had begun as pretense had become the most real thing in his life, a family built not on obligation but on love, choice, and the courage to begin again. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared, and as Xavier kissed his bride, he heard Samuel's delighted laugh, the sound of a child who had found his home at last.